Testing. YouTube is not receiving messages. That's bad because I use those videos. Let's check if YouTube is working. Live now. So that's working. Let's go to your channel, manage videos. We'll see under live, we can update the title to read week 10 because this is week 10. We will get rid of that. We'll do system design interviews and actually and a bunch of business. Josh, hello. Grifter. You how's married life now then? Now that you are big time married. Oh, I'm really good. Thank you for asking. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Good times. That's good. What else? So, as I was getting ready to start today's session, so it was like about 6:30, I I was flipping through my phone and I saw a news article that said that the Bay and Dundas location of Best Buy is getting NVIDIA RTX 3080 video cards in stock, and I was like, I gotta get. So I've been on, like, I might get interrupted this session by somebody phoning me from Best Buy to see if they have those, to see if they have them in stock. But here, let me test this again. YouTube test. Okay, YouTube. I don't know. I just want to have the sort of best video card available on the market for like games. And so one of the things I did last week, which was really fun and cool. Hello, Rajat. How are you? One of the things I did last week that was really fun and cool was I was working in machine learning. And like with real live data, like to do, and if you use a graphics card, you can train your machine learning models a lot faster using, I don't know, they do fancy stuff, but it is not supported on Radeon or AMD cards yet, so you have to use the NVIDIA stuff. So there's like a couple of and for like high quality VR and all of that stuff, I wanted to have like the top of the line card, but no idea. They're probably already sold out. I mean, I know this is Canada, but this is also Toronto, so we're probably just as crazy about that. So, so today the plan, really. So it's been 2 weeks off. Thank you for coming back. I thought today we have all of these system design things, but I thought that since some of you are likely to be starting in new jobs soon, that the first one we should probably watch is this one, which is a bit interesting. 2 tests last week. One was 4 hours. One. Yeah, the 30-minute one. Is there anything like particularly interesting out of either of the opportunity? You'll tell me more when you know more, I guess. How did you feel about them though? This is kind of interesting. 4 hours standard React, build this app. Okay, that seems okay. I mean, you know a bit of React, or a fair amount of React, I would imagine. Was it on site or like take home? And then run a function similar to anything required. Oh, okay. And you must have nailed that one this time because you've been doing your practice and you sort of like, how did you feel? Like you must have felt like, oh, both were take home. Okay, okay. And peer program interview. Interesting. Okay. And how did you feel going through that one this time? You must be a lot more comfortable with them now. Everyone I'm talking to is saying that hiring is really, yeah, both were easy. The 30-minute one I did recursive, and then he asked how I would do it iterative. Ah, did you actually also solve it iteratively in the time that you had? Or did you just explain how to solve it iteratively? Ooh, I'm excited. So you got two of them done. Oh, they're going to be in love. They're going to be all about you, man. I hope. I hope. I hope this one works out. Oh. Oh, that sounds really good. Did you get down to time complexity and stuff too? Oh, yes. Yes. Oh, nice. Oh my god. That's amazing, man. Oh, so good. So good. Big celebrations. So, yeah, who knows? Maybe you do need system design for your round two. Um, that's um, well, that makes this week's decision to talk about
Are you searching for a tech job?
negotiating. Um, Iterative was O event. Oh, really good. So, yeah, and solving it. Yeah, I think. Now, I don't know. I mean, you have your follow ups, and so that's all that matters. And in a 30-minute interview, yeah, I think that's pro. Who knows? You have your follow ups. You made it through to the next round. That's what matters. That's awesome. That's so awesome. Here, let me move this into theater mode. Um, so what I thought would be useful this week, because I watched this one. Um, I watched this in the 2 weeks we were off, and I thought this one would be really worth sharing because it has salary negotiation, a simulation. So they sort of like go back and forth as if they are. They go back and forth as if they're negotiating a salary, and so what you get to hear are the standard phrases that you can throw out when talking with the recruiter. You're going to want to know these things because they're going to start trying to find out about, especially, for your second or third interview, they're going to, if they are serious, they're going to start talking about money. So you want to know about this offer negotiation. Also, and we'll talk about this a little next, but there's a free online book that comes highly recommended from people on the internet. And it's not too long, but it's sort of like there is a highly recommended book on how to um, negotiate your salary. But let's watch the video. And
Here's how to get paid more. Hey everyone, I'm super excited to be doing an exponent plus levels.fyi negotiation simulation today. In this simulation, we're going to help you negotiate your offers for roles in tech like product management, software engineering, product marketing management, technical program management, and much more. I'm here today with Zahir, the co-founder of
I assume the sound levels are okay, not too quiet for anybody.
levels.fyi. Zahir, could you just tell us a little bit more about yourself and levels.fyi before we jump into the simulation?
Sure. Hey everyone. My name is Zahir. Levels.fyi. At our mission is to help people make better career decisions, and we're one of the most accurate websites for comparing salaries and compensation in tech. And we aim to help you get paid more.
Awesome. Well, hopefully throughout this simulation today, we're going to be doing three different scenarios where we're going to be I'll be pretending like I'm a recruiter and Zahir will be a candidate. So I'll be a recruiter at a tech company, which will be referred to as ATC throughout this call. And Zahir will be applying for the role and going through the interview process. And basically what we'd like you to take away as a viewer from this call are simple, important things that you need to know when you're negotiating your offer and moving through it. And so we're really excited to do the simulation with you today. Zahir, any other thoughts or comments before we jump into simulation number one, which will be a simulation around before you start interviewing at the company?
hmm Yeah, I mean, just at a high level, negotiation is really all about leverage. And so as we're kind of working through these scenarios, keep a close eye and ear on what we're saying, what we're talking about, and specifically the type of words or the type of language that's being used, and also the strategies that are being used. So yeah, just keep that in mind as we work through it.
Awesome. All right, excited to jump in. So I'm going to go ahead and put my recruiter hat on, and this scenario will be a scenario where Zahir, you're about to start interviewing for the company, and you're having that first recruiter call.
hmm
All right. Um, hey, Zahir, super excited to have you interview with ATC. I'm the recruiter for ATC. My name is Steven. I'll be helping you through this process. But first, I just wanted to have a quick conversation around what compensation might look like, just to get some level setting going on.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited. I've heard a lot about ATC. I read a lot about it and excited to kind of go through this process.
Awesome. Well, we also love your profile, so we're really excited to interview with you. Just to start off the bat, it'd be really helpful if you could provide me with some expectations you have around compensation and what your previous compensation is at your current company.
hmm Yeah, so I don't think I'll be able to reveal my previous compensation. I don't think it's actually allowed now these days to ask about that. But and I also haven't actually given it much thought on what I'd expect for my next role's compensation. But I'd love to hear if you guys have a salary range in mind for this role and what you guys have budgeted for it.
Got it. Got it. Sorry to be misclear. Like, sort of, don't need to know the exact numbers of your previous compensation, but would love to just get a little bit of understanding, maybe around kind of like your um, expectations or what you're looking for in a role. The reason I ask is it really helps
hmm
us actually make you first and foremost in the interview process. If I know your expected compensation, I can make sure that you get the role and the salary that's best for you, and so it usually increases people's salary.
Totally understand. Really appreciate that. Honestly, for me, compensation kind of isn't really my end all. Although it's important, obviously throughout for what I'm looking for. But it's
Oops.
not the end all for me,
Sorry,
and
I was
I'd rather
laughing.
make sure that we match on team
Thank you,
role,
Rajat.
the company culture, all of that. So I trust that we'll be able to come to a nice number later on in the process, and I think we can discuss that later.
Okay, that sounds okay. That sounds good. I mean, um, what I can provide, I know you asked about range, so the range is around, a reasonable amount for a tech employee, or sort of standard for the role. But do you have any sense of kind of like compensation or things that you might like? Even just like a rough number or a big range would be really helpful if you could provide something in that area.
Yeah, again, I haven't given it much thought yet, but I'd love to hear. Do you guys have a specific range in mind for the role, and what that looks like?
Yeah. So if we had to say a range, it'd probably be around 80 to 100K base salary for this particular role.
Okay,
But it's
great.
super subject to change, and would want to hear kind of like how that lands on you, and how it feels for you as a role, and things like that.
Yeah, I'm still doing research. It sounds workable, and I'm sure we can land on a good number later on in the process.
Oh yeah, this is absolutely really hard to do, and I mean, and in real life, and I'm hoping that this is the one where they talk about it, but um, there are some really good tips there are some really good tips that came out of this one. Um, I think, but yeah, this is really
Okay.
hard.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and take my recruiter hat off, and now we can debrief that conversation really quickly. So, Zahir, any reflections on how that went or what your strategy was in the conversation?
Yeah, so first thing to note is that negotiations start really early. People might be surprised or thrown off by the fact that a recruiter will sometimes ask about their compensation expectations in the first call, and it's important to be prepared for that conversation and come in with some strategies or some lines around how you want to handle that conversation. Deflection is the most powerful tool. So you'll see that throughout the process, I was deflecting and saying, "Hey, I don't really have anything in mind. I haven't given it much thought." And also, you can you can answer a question with another question. So I flip the question back on you by saying, "Hey, what is the range for this role?" Right? And sometimes it may help even prior to this conversation. We actually suggest everyone go into the job search knowing your worth. That's important because sometimes, let's say you let a number let loose, at least that number is something that you've researched ahead of time, and we like to call it like a high anchor. That you've set a high anchor in in early conversations, right? So although you should never reveal your compensation number to recruiters, in the worst case scenario where you do let one slip, then always know your words so that you're setting a high anchor and you're setting the tone for the rest of the conversation.
Got it. Super, super helpful tips to hear. And overall, yeah, to those of the viewers, like obviously I was trying to be very pushy as a recruiter. Not all recruiters are quite as pushy or may ask it in that way, but definitely some segments of what I said are things that are said to people. And it's helpful to know, yeah, like you don't have to provide your compensation. You don't have to do any of those things. And it's not a requirement, even if it may seem like it is or it may seem usual for that to be the case.
Yep. And on that, actually, one more note. You'll notice that, he asked about my past compensation, and in many states that's actually illegal for recruiters to ask for that, and so I kind of touched on that in the call itself, gently. In some ways you want to keep it gentle still and using mostly neutral language, but that's something to note as well. Like those are your rights, and you're totally within your rights to actually deflect it and not provide a number.
Yeah, so, and it sucks that a lot of people don't.
Just to bring that up, this is his website right here, and I know I've showed this before, but like for getting an idea of what your number should be, you can go here. You can also look at here's an Amazon L4. So when you look at something like Amazon specific, what's really nice is if we go to overview, I think. Oh, there was a really nice page that had the years of experienced. Oh, maybe it's this one. They sort of, so they let you know what the ranges are. There's the years of experience is one of the bullets on this chart. So it's like, someone with 8 years of, let me see if we can see a Toronto one in this list. New York. Yeah, it would be nice if you could filter this on location. But anyways, these are all useful for getting a sense. Obviously, the Toronto salaries are higher, but you can sort of get an idea of if you are look at that, 7 years of experience at super low price. Anyways, so I wanted to bring that up, make sure that we show that again.
Don't know that, or maybe be misled in some of these conversations, and may even accidentally share that willingly. So it's really helpful to have that tip. And just to plug levels.fyi, if people want to find that anchor that you're mentioning, Zahir, it sounds like people can go to levels.fyi and kind of look up the roles and get a rough sense of what they're going for.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to search your company or find other similar companies and roles. And we have a ton of data on how much people are getting paid, so hopefully it's helpful.
Cool. All right, so now we're going to go to the scenario 2. So in this scenario, we're going to flash forward a little bit. We're going to imagine that Zahir went through the interview process and successfully succeeded. Perhaps he used Exponent's courses online and things like that. Maybe he interviewed for a PM role or a software engineering role, and he really crushed the interviews. And so now he successfully got to the stage of an offer. So now what I'd like to talk about is we'll have that conversation where the recruiter first tells Zahir about the offer. And this offer will be time-based. And this is a really common thing. It's often called like an exploding offer colloquially by people. And we'll have that conversation and we'll see how Zahir kind of handles it, and we'll go walk through it. Anything else to preface this one before we jump into it, Zahir?
No, I think you covered it.
Cool. Okay, Hazel here. Incredible news. The ATC team, we loved you. We loved your interviews. You really crushed it. We'd actually love to offer you a position with our company. And so we're super, super excited to give you this position. I will say, unfortunately, that we're hiring really quickly. We're like a super fast startup, growing quickly, as
Hmm.
you know. And
Yeah.
so there are often things that change all the time. And so we will need to know by end of next week at the latest. Otherwise, we unfortunately won't be able
Mm.
to honor the offer anymore. And the offer, just to give you a sense, is about 100K base salary with 70K RSUs. We can talk more about that later. But
Hmm.
this is a verbal offer. If you do want to accept the offer, we can
Hmm.
then
Hmm.
send you over that written offer. I'm super, super excited. But again, we will need to know by end of
Hmm.
next week, or else we
Yeah.
unfortunately can't guarantee the position.
Yeah. So first of all, definitely thanks for the offer. I'm super excited. This has been, in some ways, it's just been a learning process, and I've loved everyone that I've spoken to there throughout my interviews, and I'm really excited to basically come on board. That said, this is a big decision for me, and I do want to make sure I have time to kind of adequately, compare everything that I need to, figure out everything that I need to. Do you mind if I get another week or two to decide? I know you guys have things on your end, but again, this is a very big personal decision, and I'd love to have a little bit more time to discuss with my family and with some of my mentors.
Yeah, great to hear your interest is here. Um, it is a really tough time for us, just in terms of speed and things like that. We have a lot of candidates coming in. We have a lot of other really qualified candidates. We did really love you.
Hmm.
I'd be curious to hear, is there something wrong with the offer or something like that would need more time? We feel like this is a really great fit, and we are making an offer. A little disappointed to hear that maybe you might need more time and it's not a clear decision for you.
Yeah, so actually, it would be great if to help me evaluate if you can actually send me a written offer. That way, I can take a look at all the details and review everything. And it'll also help me make a decision having those numbers in front of me. That said, again, I'm super excited about the role. Really, I just want to make sure that this is a huge decision for me. So I really want to make sure that I'm coming in with a clear head, and I'm able to chat with all the people that I need. That said, do you actually have some time to speak with the hiring manager sometime next week?
Yeah, totally. We can definitely talk to the hiring manager if that's something that you're looking for. What would you be hoping to get out of that?
Yeah, I'm just looking to learn a little bit more about the team. The interviews were great, but again, I think there's some things that I wasn't able to glean in the interviews just because of the time and things. So I'd really love to talk to the hiring manager just to get to know more about his team, and specifically, how career progression on his team is and things around that. And that said, I do want to make sure that I have adequate time before and after the call to actually really evaluate, let that call kind of sink in, and make sure that I get any questions cleared up. So again, I'm super excited for the role. I just want to make sure that that we're both a great fit. And yeah.
Okay, Zahir, I think that can work. I can set you up a call with our hiring manager. I think he'd love to chat with you, and we'd love to generally
Sweet.
just chat with you on the team. But I will say, like, people are at the team really excited about you, and we wouldn't want you to be really excited. So I'm not totally sure we can move that deadline, but I'll see what we can do. We're really looking for someone who's really excited about the team, and I wouldn't want to jeopardize your chances of joining the team just because of a delayed offer or something like that.
Like you see the guilt trip there, and you see the like. This is really this is really really hard to sit through, and so this is I think this really is why I loved this video so much. Was I mean, there are just this technique. He doesn't really want to talk to the hiring, and he says this in a moment, so I am spoiling it for you. But he doesn't really want to talk to the hiring manager. He wants the time. He wants it in writing, and so watching this in this way is like, you get to sort of cringe and feel the emotions of this experience without actually having to be in the middle of it, so that when you experience it yourself in real life, you sort of hopefully have like a little bit of a toolkit together to sort of, you know just do better.
So
Yeah, totally understand.
yeah, and
Um,
go ahead.
yeah, I just appreciate anything you can do. I just want to make sure that I have all the info and facts as I move forward. That said, I do want to step back a little. You mentioned some of the numbers. I just wanted to clarify the equity portion of it. Is the vesting schedule over 4 years, and what percentage for each of those 4 years is vesting?
Right, it's a 4-year vesting timeline with a 25% cliff
Yeah.
after all those 4 years, or you'll
Okay.
you'll progress 25% each year.
Okay, so just to clarify, 25% of equity vests each year. So, if that was a 70K grant, basically I'd be getting 25% of that in each year, right?
That's correct.
Cool.
Yes.
And do you guys have any 401k plan or other sort of like commuter benefits or things? I just want to make sure that I'm evaluating the entire offer completely and holistically.
Yeah, totally. So we do have a 50% 401k matching plan, and we have commuter benefits as
Great.
well, like tax deductible commuter benefits.
Sweet. Cool. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah,
Yeah, they're so. I mean, this is the thing. They're so good at. I mean, because they practice this every single day with, or well, not every day, but like with every candidate that comes along, they've got their tool set and they've got their sort of script that they work with. Whereas we're kind of going in, not quite blind, but we're going in without these tools. And yeah, it is. It's kind of like this is the used car salesman role. Anyways,
glad you asked those questions. It's really helpful just to get a sense of for your offer. So just one last thing on this conversation before we kind of move forward. We don't typically do written offers until people are for sure accepting it. So like if you'd like a written offer, just let me know. I can send it over to you, but only after you sort of have verbally accepted it.
Yeah, that's understandable. I just want to make sure that I'm able to review all the terms in the offer because sometimes that can affect what really happens for me. So I'd love if you can send over some form of the offer in writing, even if it's not the complete final form. It will just help me evaluate all the different
Oh, I hit pause by accident.
terms and conditions there.
Sorry.
Okay, yeah, we can send over something informal, maybe not a formal offer, but an informal
Sure.
sense of the numbers.
Great, thanks.
Okay, all right, Zahir, I'm going to take off that recruiter hat and we're going to debrief this call. How do you think it went, or what were some of the things that you were doing going into this conversation?
Yeah, I get like my mind going into this conversation and these types of conversations is always you don't want to make any decisions on the call about the offer. Really, this is a chance for you to ask questions, and you want to show that you're committed to the company. Companies want to see that you're committed as well, and part of this is ensuring that you want to make sure that you're not wasting the recruiter's time, and they want to see that their time is not being wasted, right? So really. Having all of that set out is I think important. Being gracious, number one. The second thing is really try to force their hand if they're not giving time to have like an exploding deadline of like a week or whatever. Force their hand by maybe requesting another meeting with the hiring manager. So that's a tactic that you could use is by having another event in between. Now, when that event happens, when I have a meeting with the hiring manager, I can come back to the recruiter and be like, hey, I had a great call, but there's some things that I want to make sure I clear up with my mentors or whatever that the hiring manager mentioned. It would be great if I had another week or something, right? So set yourself up for the future as well by creating opportunities to ask for an extension later on as well, even if you're not able to get that extension in the first call. And really, I think recruiters tend to be fairly pushy on deadlines. They've invested a couple months and several hours of their engineers' time, their hiring manager's time, and not just engineers. If it's a PM role, they've invested time of their employees at the company, and so they've already invested so much into you. They don't want to let you go. They don't want this offer to not work out. They want this offer to work out, right? And so don't treat it as like an adversarial relationship. Treat it as something that you want to work together to get that right outcome. Whenever you get in like a tough situation, feel free to deflect or blame it on others. Like, hey, I need to talk to my mentor, or I need to talk to my wife or my family or whatever. So yeah, just a couple tactics to use in that very important call.
That's awesome. Those are great tips. One thing I also just wanted to call out that I think you did really effectively was ask about the offer and get all the details on the call as you could. And then also, I know getting it in writing was something important to you. Can you talk a little bit more about what you might do? Let's say like I was still stubborn and I was still not giving you that offer in writing. Like how would you deal with that, or how would you handle that scenario?
Yeah, so it's funny. Like, there's a lot of companies don't actually like to give written offers these days, and written offers are useful, especially when you're negotiating with another company, and you want to use that offer as a counter offer, essentially as leverage. And so one way that you can actually get something in writing is by perhaps sending an email to the recruiter or hiring manager and asking, restating the offer essentially and asking, hey, did I capture the details correctly? Does this make sense? And now when the recruiter or hiring manager replies with, yes, this is, that you captured all the details, then you can use that as kind of like written proof or evidence for other companies. So it's kind of sneaky, but it's a good tactic if companies are really insistent in not giving a written offer.
Super helpful stuff here. I do want to move on to the third conversation that we're going to have. And this
Mhm.
conversation is going to be after Zahir has extended the offer, he's taken some time to review it. But now he'd like to negotiate on that compensation to get the compensation that he feels like is the best fit for him. And so the way this conversation will go is it'll be on a video chat, but Zahir, I know you have some thoughts on why it would be better done on email, so maybe you can share that as well. But we'll try to simulate this like a situation on video chat, and it may not be exactly how it plays out. But I'll just kind of restate the offer, and then Zahir we'll try to negotiate with it. Anything before we jump into this, Zahir?
No, I think you captured it. Yeah.
Great. Okay. So hey, Zahir, super excited. Again, the offer that I mentioned, it's 100K base salary, 70K RSUs. Super excited to have you join the team. Would love to hear sort of, what you're thinking and what your updated thoughts are.
Yeah, so if I'm calculating it correctly, it comes out to about, around 135, 140 in total compensation. Did I capture that correctly?
Well, we are giving you 70K in RSUs and 100K in base, so that's actually 170 in compensation.
But the 70K is spread over 4 years, is that right? So each year, basically, I'd only be receiving 25% of that?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm taking a look at the annual compensation correctly. I'm super excited again about the company and the role. I just want to mention that it was great chatting with the hiring manager and chatting with the team during the interviews. So, again, super excited about the role. I've been thinking about compensation, and obviously, it's important to me to ensure that I'm able to provide for my family and everything. At the same time, it's not kind of like the end all, but I do want to make sure I'm being paid fairly. I was hoping, based on some of the market data I've seen, whether we can raise that total compensation yearly to closer to 160K. Again, I know that you might not have an immediate decision, and you might need to talk to folks on your team. But I'd love to get that number moved up to 160K.
Got it. Helpful to hear where your head's at to hear. We're a lean, fast-growing startup. It's really tough for us to kind of grow. And honestly, we usually like kind of skipping these negotiation conversations because we feel like we try to inflate the offer a little bit higher, knowing all this negotiation stuff. So we typically don't really negotiate on the offer. Is something else wrong with the offer or the company or the opportunity that you'd want to change that conversation?
No. Yeah, again, I want to be really clear. I'm super excited about the role, super excited about the company. I just want to make sure that, for me, I see this as like an investment in the long run. I'm going to be giving it all to this company for a number of years. And, I want to make sure that throughout that time, I'm going to be fairly compensated. And that way, I'm not looking at other companies later on. I see this as really an investment on my end as well. I'm going to be spending a lot of time there, and I want to make sure that that I'm going to be happy, and in the long run, I think it aligns both of us for success.
Okay, super helpful to hear Zahir. I guess, do you have a competing offer or something else? Otherwise, I'm not totally sure we can negotiate if there isn't like another offer or competing thing going on.
Yeah, so I'm in the chats with a couple of companies, and I do. Again, I want to reiterate that I'm super excited about the role, and so I haven't mentioned it as much in the past that I have other companies that I'm considering. I do have a competing offer as well, and unfortunately, I can't share the numbers right now, but it is competitive, and if we are able to get to 160K, I do think that I'd be able to sign kind of on the spot.
Got it. And so here, I guess, could you share the numbers? It would be really helpful if you could email it to me, like the offer that you have, so we could take a look.
Yeah, honestly, I'd love to do that, but a lot of companies are, would like to keep their offers confidential, and just like how, I wouldn't want to share your offer with another company. I want to make sure that I keep their offers private as well. And I do think though that it's a competitive offer, and I'm super excited about this team. I really think that I'd be happy to sign right away if we can get to 160K.
Got it. Okay, let me take it to the team, Zahir, and I'll let you know. Thanks for providing this context and information.
Sweet, yeah.
All right, my recruiter hat comes off, and again, Zahir, I would love to hear what you were going for in that conversation and how it went.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing is that you want to make sure that you're always taking into account everything in the picture, right? And the reason in a previous call I asked about like the vesting schedule, the 401k, any other sort of even non-monetary compensation things. And the reason you want to do that is to show the recruiter and to set the impression that you're very savvy, right? You want to make sure that you're understanding your offer correctly, not just so that you know the numbers, but also to communicate to the recruiter that, hey, you're evaluating their offer for all its kind of worth, so to speak, right? And that way the recruiter can't come at you and be like, oh, like, did you consider this? We also have a 401k, or we also have this. Did you factor these things in, right? If it gets to that, then, you know, you almost get cornered in some ways, because they'll be like, oh, you know, yes, our offer is X amount, but if you factor in, you know, this, and this, it comes out to some other amount. So you want to make sure you're not being cornered, and that you're evaluating the offer holistically, and you're communicating to the recruiter that you've actually evaluated all aspects of the offer. That's why we also suggest actually negotiating on the total compensation number, right? So you'll notice that I broke it down by year, and was negotiating on the annualized amount. And, you know, it's a very standardized way of looking at compensation, and so most companies are okay with actually looking at it that way. When you have that type of conversation, when you're negotiating on the total compensation, it provides more flexibility for both parties to get you to your target compensation, right? So I want to make clear that I came in with a number in mind, a target number, 160K in this case, right? And again, it's usually helpful, and we suggest folks actually have, once you're at this stage, and once the company has shown their hands around what the compensation is, now it's okay to provide a number of what your target number is, because now they've already shown their hands. So, you know, now there's not much else to lose, so to speak, right? And so by negotiating for that total compensation number, you know, I can ask it in different ways. Can you increase the sign-on bonus? Can you increase the RSUs? And it gives flexibility for both parties to be actually reach that outcome. And so, yeah, I think kind of to summarize that point, you know, negotiate on total compensation, communicate that you understand the offer fully, to the recruiter, right? Ask questions when they present the offer to you, so that they know that you're savvy, and they know that you're taking everything into account. And lastly, you know, really know your worth. You know, have a target number in mind when you come into these conversations. You should know what you generally want. And I will say that almost for every single offer that's given out, there's always like 5 to 10% of wiggle room. So no matter what number that they give you, never kind of accept an offer blindly. There's always wiggle room typically. You know, companies won't give their like maximum offer to you out the gate. It's a mutual kind of understanding that everyone negotiates, or people negotiate. And so, you know, you want to make sure that you do negotiate, otherwise you're leaving that money on the table.
Totally. Super, super helpful to hear. And one thing I want to call out that I think is really effective that you're doing is, sometimes I'm asking the same question twice, or I'm asking the same question in multiple ways, and you simply say no, or like, sorry, I can't do that. And you're sort of like calm and collected as you do that, and just sort of saying that, like, yeah, sorry, I'm not going to give that information. And it can feel really scary in the moment for people. So I do want to recognize this emotional component of like, oh my gosh, I have to keep saying no to someone, or I have to keep like, you know, I don't know, maybe I feel bad about it. But I do want to encourage folks watching, like, this is an opportunity for you to get your worth and get the value that you deserve for the company. And I love the ways Zahir phrase it, where it's like, really, you're going to give this company your all. And so, you know, you want to make sure that compensation makes sense for you and makes sense for the company in both directions. So I want to pause there.
There we are. So I guess this might not be the video or the article where it happened, but one of the other things I read recently was that if you give a range, say you're interested in, what did we see on levels.fyi, it said 160. So if you were interested in 160, but you were willing to take, you know, 150 or 155 or whatever, you could say like, oh, I'm interested in 155 to 180, and then when they come in at a 165 or 170, then like you're already beating the number that you were interested in. So that's one of the things I've seen recently.
Just see if there's any kind of like last tips and things like that. Zahir, if you have people, but before you jump into those tips, folks, if you're watching right now, definitely comment below and let us know if you have questions. Both Zahir and I will be watching this video to help out and answer questions, support you in your journey. We know this is a really tough, anxious, scary process sometimes, and it's filled with a lot of unclear scenarios and things like that. So definitely let us know in the comments below, and do please like and subscribe this video if you feel like it's helpful for you. But yeah, Zahir, do you have any other like closing out thoughts or tips about the interview process, the negotiation process?
Yeah, like as you saw, this conversation is pretty hard to have. It's a very like nerve-wracking conversation for a lot of folks, and obviously, like, you know, I can appear cool and collected now because it's not, you know, nothing's really on the line in this mock interview. But it's you know, hard. when push comes to shove and you're actually on the call with the recruiter, most people actually will get very nervous, and so we actually recommend most folks to actually take the negotiations offline. You know, have these conversations over email. And sometimes the recruiter will get on the call and be like, okay, we're able to increase the numbers to the like XYZ number. Is that okay with you? Again, anytime they present numbers or something, you can always be like, hey, can I get back to you? I want to make sure I discuss this with my wife or my mentor or whatever, right? So always try to deflect, and your escape out of all of these, tough situations or tough conversations is, hey, can I get back to you? You can always come back to the recruiter, and typically they're always okay with, coming back and you taking a bit of extra time to actually think about it. So, again, we suggest folks to actually take the negotiations over email and, write out what you want to say. It's much easier to come in with a clear head when you actually have time to sit down, write it out. And, when the recruiter comes back with, a similar written email, then again, it gives you time and you can kind of think through it with a clear head. So highly suggest really taking those conversations offline, off the phone.
Totally. Great stuff, Zahir. I do want to close up this video and just let folks know watching, if you are interviewing for a tech role, this video is part of Exponent. Exponent is an online tool and resource and community to help you advance your career in tech. We believe that interviewing shouldn't be so alone, and so we have a 1,000+ person community of people interviewing for roles in product management, software engineering, technical.
Here, let's look at their website. We've done a lot of Exponent. I think they're really good, but we'll take another second to take a look at their page. And I wonder, do they have a website as well? Exponent. Yeah, we'll do that later. Anyways, so this one was, I was really excited to share this one because I thought it was, what do you do if you've already given a number and you want to, you say you changed your mind. I guess, it's a good thought experiment. You probably don't want to say, I've changed my mind and now I want more, but I guess because you are honestly, you are negotiating, you are talking to other, like you're going on multiple interviews, you've got multiple follow-ups. You could be finding yourself, fingers crossed in a bidding war situation, but even if not, on the day that the offer comes in, just like oh my gosh, I can't even, I hope they have his name listed here. Zahir. So just like Zahir is saying, you could say something like, hey, I'm interviewing with multiple other people and I'm wondering, and the compensation picture that I'm getting from my other interviews or my other market research is higher. So, so maybe that's a way to do it. Like you could say, I've got these competing, and that's a story you can probably spin. And what's interesting about it's effectively a bit of a bait and switch, right? Like, and it could happen. It could happen for real because, like, one group. So let's say you've given your number to both of them, and they both come back and it's at your number, but you want more. You could start saying like, "Oh, I'm sorry that this may feel like a bait and switch, but I have been interviewing with multiple parties, and I am, I guess another thing you can do in the meantime, while you are looking for work, start talking to the recruiters who reach out and start giving a higher number, right? And so it won't even be a lie if you start getting people who are having genuine interest in your work. And just like he's saying, like, I know that this is probably a challenge for you because you were expecting a certain number to begin with, and now, based on my market research, things are changing, and but like, what was that one that he said over here? He was saying like, look, I would like to be here and stay here for a long time. I would like this to be an investment. And I don't want to have to think about going elsewhere uh, or looking at other companies, and you just sort of you work within that framework and kind of try and play with it. Because yeah, there's you set a number, and these processes take a couple of months, and now the number's changed. So that can happen. So but anyways, I thought that one was so useful and so worth sharing that I wanted to drop that in now instead of um, instead of going really into the system design stuff that we've done a couple of extra weeks of anyways. So I think this one was really useful. Um, while I was away, I have been devouring these. I've been devouring these business books, these sort of like business grifter books, and some of them are good. So um, I'm going to go back to the free version. Here we are. Just a reminder, we already talked about this, but it's Fearless Salary Negotiation / book. So if you just land on the main page, Fearless Salary Negotiation, the read the book link has that. And so how to negotiate your new set, getting when changing companies. This is the how to, I should read this one. How to leave a job on the best possible terms. I should have read that one before I left Click, because I kind of maybe screwed up a little there. But anyway, so this guy, this is probably a good article to read. We're not going to read it in real time, but there are great tips on this. Like, when they come in and they say, we'll give you stock options, and we'll give you, 2 times your salary in stock options. If they are not yet a publicly traded company, those stock options could take 10 years to mature. So focus on base salary is something. And I just said, just go through, read this. Additionally, if you look down in the footer, there is a section for articles, and they're sort of popular pages. So the articles are like, how do you answer the salary expectation question? Ooh, that's new. That's exciting. I might read that later. These seem to be highly keyed for keywords, but they're Anyway. So this is a highly recommended website from the Silicon Valley leadership folks. Resignation letter templates, things like that. So a really, really great site. And so for the next set of things that I want to do, because I spent so much time over the break going through these business books, I think this one, since many of you are expecting to, I really like the Happiness Advantage, but we can talk about that. The first 90 days is a sort of, because in addition to negotiating the salary, you kind of want to think about when you arrive at your new job. And this is
focusing on
here we go. So I actually haven't. We're going to do this a little faster, but if I go to Toronto Public Library, and we do the first 90 days, you can see, so it's available as an audiobook, which is how I did it, but it's also available in, like, look, 174 copies. Like, it's a hugely popular long time book. So you can get ebook, audiobook. You can get paper copies. Um, and what it effectively provides is a guidebook for how do you get up to speed at a new job so that you can be super effective, so that you can be effective more quickly, and what do you aim for in doing that. So I thought I would run this,
The right
I
things
think,
in the end. And so
um,
as you think about the first 90 days, I just
normal
want to stress that
one.
there really is a big impact from using this particular framework in the right ways. We've done some research on this. This is a summary of a study I did with Egon Zender, where the results looking at this group of executives joining major companies was that they could get up to full performance in about 50% of the time that it would otherwise take. And that's actually a pretty wonderful impact, right? And obviously something I'm really very proud about. And if you look at the specifics of the impact, this is just a sense of, by using this framework, what do people find most helpful, right? And you can see different themes here from stakeholders, just having a plan, gaining insight into the team, understanding the culture. And certainly we're going to dig into some of these things in a bit more depth. But I think it's hopefully useful to see that there are quite important dimensions of transition that you really get a lot of benefit from if you apply this particular framework and set of tools. So why focus on transitions? Well, it's because what you do early on matters so much, because it sets the tone for everything that follows. And early on, we know from research on things such as the confirmation bias that people form opinions very quickly, and once formed, they're quite difficult to change. And so if you're successful in getting up to speed effectively, building the right relationships, understanding the challenges, right, that can begin to create a sense of confidence that can propel you through your entire time in the role. And on the other hand, if you get yourself into trouble early, it can be very difficult to reverse it. And I've had the unfortunate experience a few times of being asked to coach executives that had got themselves into a lot of trouble, right? Maybe 6 months into the role, they've alienated some key stakeholders, something about their leadership style has rubbed people the wrong way, they're abrasive in some way or another. And there's really very little they can do, or in fact I can do, to help them at a stage like that, because opinion is hardened. The conventional wisdom has kind of surrounded someone with a bit of a gray cloud, and that's going to undermine everything they do, because people are just looking for them to do more of it and feed into that set of perceptions. The flip side is that if you're successful in gaining some credibility early, you get a bit of a halo, and that halo is something that insulates you a bit, right, against what goes on next. Doesn't mean you can make terrible choices later and it's all going to be fine, but there is a bit of a cushion, if you will, that comes from having a successful transition. That quote, "You never get a second chance to make a first impression." Well, Rogers, the humorist, true, but also in the case of taking a leadership role, a new one, you often don't even get a first chance to make a first impression, because as we'll talk about, you come with a reputation, a set of expectations that surround you, really, before you even arrive in the role. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move forward. So I was, one leader whose transition I didn't advise on, but I studied after the fact, was someone who came out of a large industrial company, I won't specify the company, with a lot of experience in product development, and was hired by not a startup, but an early stage company that was just about to really take off, with a view that he would be the new sort of chief operating officer and bring discipline and systems to the organization. And this was an organization that at that point had about 2,500 employees, was kind of just poised to take off, and recognized, the CEO recognized that they needed to become more systematic and structured in order to scale. But it went very badly wrong, because the culture was so different, because this person didn't really have a clear understanding of their mandate. They came in sort of understanding or thinking that they could just simply put in place processes and systems, when there wasn't really broader support for doing that. They didn't focus enough on building those critical peer relationships with others on the leadership team. And in general, they just were the wrong person for the role, because they didn't have enough experience in leading what was basically a transformation. And so, they probably made 4 of the 5 traps or fell into 4 of the 5 traps that you see here, right? They stuck too much with what they know. They thought they knew. They came in with the answer. They were engaging in the wrong kinds of learning. We'll talk a little bit more about that. They weren't spending enough time on peer relationships. But the key thing here is to just understand from a starting point that there really are some common traps that leaders fall into in transition, and you don't want to fall into those, right? This was among the first pieces of research I did on transitions, which was just looking at what are the common mistakes that people make. I want to emphasize that sticking with what you know is number one for a reason, right? It's the most common reason I see people struggle. You see the Mark Twain quote, right? "To a person with a hammer, everything looks like a nail." Or you think about Marshall Goldsmith's again, "What got you here won't get you there." One key thing you have to do early is understand in what ways do you need to change what you do. And we'll focus on, given the demands of this role, what do you need to embrace that perhaps is challenging or difficult, or something you don't love to do? What do you need to let go of? And that's a mental discipline that I always take the people I coach through from the outset, right? What do you need to embrace? What do you need to let go of? Because it's typically the case that your skill set is not a perfect match for what you need to do. I mentioned the kind of the idea of momentum and, getting up to speed, but there really is a kind of a dynamic to this, a non-linear dynamic, right? If you do the wrong things, and it's often rooted in not doing a great job of learning and not doing a great job of connecting, you can make some bad calls, you can not, build the alliances that you need, and this can really undermine your ability to do what you need to do and ultimately contribute to these sorts of vicious cycles. So don't do that. Good transitions often are based, as you see at the bottom of the second diagram, on being effective at building those key relationships, alliances.
Here we go. This is actually probably the most important part. And I have to confess, I've read the book, but I haven't gone through this entire this particular entire video. But some of the things, so in getting started, there are a lot of important things that you want to do right away. You want to engage in relationship building with the team around you. And one good way of doing that is setting up like 5 to 10 minute meetings, maybe 15-minute meetings with everybody on the team around you, and just having like coffees and chatting and connecting. And he goes into, in the book, he goes into talking about, you ask everybody in the meeting the same 5 questions. And actually, I don't think I can bring it up, but it's so like, what is the most important thing to work on at the company, and like what could prevent us from being successful in working on that, and what do we do really well, and sort of, is there anything else I need to learn? So maybe it's just 4 questions, but anyways, we'll go back to watching it.
But also engaging in the right kind of learning so you can make the right early decisions. You can focus on the right things. You can build a strategy and a vision that really is attractive in the context of the organization. So keep in mind that transition to me is very much about how do you build momentum, positive momentum, and avoid negative momentum in the context of the role that you've taken. So as you think about a framework for doing this, and this is an extension of work that I did in the first 90 days, reflecting subsequent research and building tools and so on, what you see here is a framework that is intended to kind of give you a roadmap, if you will, for progressing through your transition. I'm just going to take you through some of the elements of this, hopefully get you to think a little bit about how this might apply to you. These separate 9 elements, and I'm going to really start with this whole idea of getting started. So I just got a question, and I'm going to address it very quickly, but come back to it. How to handle discriminatory behavior in the workplace as a female leader. That's a really, really, really large topic, right? And I think it almost always begins to show up in transition, right? So you often get an intimation that this is going to be an issue. I guess I'd be asking, was there due diligence about the culture of this organization? Is it a cultural issue, or is it an issue of a specific individual? Is it systematic or individual? I think is part of it. There are standard answers, as I'm sure you know, to these things. Go talk to HR. Talk to your boss unless it is your boss. The reality is that often HR and others are not terribly helpful, right? And I've seen, pretty senior female leaders get themselves into really challenging situations where it was clear that there was bias involved, but very difficult to, in quotes, prove it. Real limits on your ability to kind of go and get, solutions for it. I know I'm not really giving you answers here, but I think that, to me, part of this is about, first of all, don't try not to take a role where you're setting yourself up for that, but there's often no way to know that completely in advance. Make sure as part of the transition process that you're building alliances broadly, because that can help you deal with these kinds of challenges. But the more general issue of, what's different for women in transition as leaders is, to me, a fascinating one. And one it's coincidental, just had a meeting to talk about. So as you think about the getting started process, there's a couple things I would emphasize here. The first is understanding the types of transitions that you're going through. And it's often, in fact, usually multiple types of transitions in parallel. And so treat this as a little bit of a checklist. Think perhaps of the last time you went into a new role, or perhaps you're going into one now. How many of these applied to you? That example I gave you of a leader that derailed, and I should have said he did derail, because out of the organization after about 9 months. There were many transitions going on here, right? Onboarding into a new company, he was promoted to a higher level. He actually did move geographically, right? He was moving from a functional role in product development, although there was some cross-functional dimensions to it, to a truly cross-functional role. I didn't say it, but it was a newly created type of role. He was coming out of an organization that was very much kind of about sustaining success and realigning into something that looked more like an accelerated growth scenario. I'll talk about that in a minute. So there were many, many dimensions to the transition. And the more types of transitions that you're going through, the greater the risk, Now, there's no easy antidote to this, although you have to be very careful about taking roles that involve too many dimensions, right? You got to be thoughtful about the size of a leap you want to make. Or if you are taking a big leap, what kind of support is going to really help you in those circumstances? It's also quite valuable to kind of pull it apart and think about which parts of this are, really challenging. Is it adapting to the new company culture? Is it learning to operate at a higher level? Is it managing multiple functions or specialties when you've been more of a specialist? And the more precise you can be about the nature of the challenge, the better you're able to then mobilize to meet it. The other thing I always recommend is, be thoughtful about how you're going to arrive and the preparation you're going to do before you're formally in the role. That's all.
I should take a moment to stop and say that, like, this is not stuff that you need to memorize in coming onto a new role, but it's really, I think, really valuable and important to know that there are guides out there. So when you do get the new job, there are guides out there for how to start a new job really well. And so while I'm not saying memorize this or practice this, but be aware that this stuff is out there and be ready to call on it when it's time. And you're going to have that. Well, you're likely going to have at least 2 weeks, because you've got your notice period at your old job, or if you were super brave, you quit your old job. Anyways, so I'm saying you don't need to memorize this. I'm saying, but it's really
Obviously,
valuable to
educating
know
yourself
that
about
it's
the
there.
organization, about the position, assuming you've got some time to do that, which is usually the case. But it's also anticipating what the reaction to your arrival is going to be, right? What are people going to think they know about you before you arrive? What dimensions of that are good, which are you're going to be a little bit problematic, you're going to have to deal with. Really be thoughtful about crafting the messages you want to send about yourself and your leadership as you arrive, and plan, in some detail, how you're going to engage in that early communication and connection work. So that's really dimensions of what you might think of as the get started kind of role for this, or a piece of this overall framework. Then there's 3 pieces here that I think of as really diagnostic, right? There's accelerating your learning, there's matching your strategy to the situation, and there's gaining alignment with key stakeholders, especially your boss, but potentially with others too. Just go through each one of these in turn. Oh, that's a great question. Anything to emphasize or pay attention to while joining a new company as the leader remotely? Yes. So I actually published an HBR Online article a couple of months back that we can send you the link to for that, about onboarding new leaders remotely. It's hard, right? Because the normal things you would do just to kind of gather information informally aren't there. It means you have to be much more structured about the learning process, and you need to ask the organization to help you with that process. It means you need to be much more structured and disciplined about connecting with people, and you want to ask the organization for some help to do that too. And I guess what I would add that we find consistently is the biggest challenge is not dealing with your own team, your own new team, because you have the power to convene those people, to begin to direct them, to begin to connect with them, even if you feel a little isolated. Where it's really challenging is connecting with your peers, right? Where normally you might be able to, much more organically interact with your peers, or your boss for that matter. Here it has to really be organized, and you need to kind of win their attention. And that's not necessarily easy, especially given all of what's going on right now. But I think as part of the follow-up, maybe we can send a link to that
Absolutely.
article. So a little on each of these 3 things, right? So accelerate learning. I think it's, first of all, recognize there's distinct types of learning you might have to be doing. I divide it into technical learning, products, markets, technologies, systems, cultural learning, values, behavioral patterns, ways of doing things, right? Rights and wrongs, the value set of the organization, and then political learning, right? How are decisions made? Who has power? Who has influence? How do you navigate the corridors of power to get things done in the context of a new organization? And thinking about the relative balance, right? So the leader I mentioned earlier, the derailed leader, he was very focused on the technical learning side and not enough on understanding the culture or the political system in which he was arriving, which was almost kind of like a family, right? Or a tribe, right? They've been together as they built this organization up to this point. And so, he didn't do the work necessary to become part of the family, right? Or part of the tribe. And that was part of what really undercut him. Keep in mind that culture is like the organization's immune system, right? You have to be very careful not to do some things that can trigger the immune system. And examples are overestimating your mandate to make change, right? You may have been told you're there to make change happen, but that doesn't necessarily mean you really have a mandate. And so once you come into the organization, you really need to check and recheck that you have the mandate to do what you think you need to do, right? And if not, you need to kind of build and clarify that mandate. Coming in with the answer, right? No one likes to be told that you have the answer to problems they struggle with. Even if you really do have the answer to the problems they can struggle with, you still need to socialize. You need to deal with the reality of the egos that you're dealing with, and try to kind of embed progressively perhaps what it is you already know at some level you need to do. This is the last one, creating the sense you think there's no good here. This was something I learned, or not learned, but I saw very directly with a CEO I did some work with. I was coaching him as the new CEO of a big healthcare system in the US. And he was a very focused, disciplined, problem-solving, you know, trained originally as an engineer, you know, very operationally focused CEO. And in fact, the organization needed that. But in the process of beginning to connect and do his diagnosis and think about his agenda, all he focused on was the things that weren't working, right? He didn't kind of pay any attention to, you know, this is pretty good or they've done good work there. And so the organization, when I did the set of interviews I usually do to kind of see how, you know, a new exec is doing, the feedback was he doesn't think we've done anything good here in the entire history of the organization. That was not what he thought, but he was creating the impression. And so I gave him this feedback, you know, as I do. And he literally sort of hit himself on the head and said, you know, I know, he says, I know my wife always tells me, sprinkle a little sugar on it, dear, sprinkle a little sugar. And so there's a lesson here, I think, about the perceptions you can create as a new CEO or a new senior leader without really even intending to, right? And so being, you know, pretty thoughtful, right, about managing the impressions you're creating and balancing, right, the necessary focus on what needs to be worked on with, you know, the parts where the organization has done a good job. And, you know, I joke that there's no organization so dismal that it hasn't accomplished something good in its history, right, that you can find, which is akin to the Dale Carnegie advice, the famous advice about influencing people. Find something you like about this person, right? Even if it's a small thing, find something you can like about them. So hopefully clear about this. Culture, you know, is a complex subject. I'm not going to deal with it in any detail beyond saying that most transitions, even if you're moving internally, involves some dimension of adapting to a new culture. It could be a new functional culture. It could be a new part of the organization. It could be that the culture at more senior levels is subtly different than the one you're currently, you know, working with or in. And so understanding that culture has levels, right? The surface level of terms and acronyms that people use and symbology, the bottom level of those fundamental assumptions and values, but really that critical middle level of behavioral norms, where I think you need to focus your attention. I give you some thoughts in the slides. Again, we'll be sharing the slides with you about ways, dimensions of those behavioral norms to take a look at and questions to ask, right? And of course, in the first 90 days itself, there's more about how to do this kind of diagnostic work. So, you know, that's accelerate your learning.
I'm going to take a moment to he mentioned earlier on this one called "What Got You Here Won't Get You There," and that one is also a very popular and well-regarded book. There's actually the full version is available sitting right there on YouTube for some reason, which I managed to get through last night, but I have to listen again because I think I fell asleep during it. But anyway, so it's like he's mentioning, like, a lot of the books that he's mentioning are sort of like, there's so much overlap between these books. They're saying the same things over and over again, but each one has their own spin on it, and sort of that repetition helps bring it together.
In the end,
sorry, before I keep going, and the "What Got You Here Won't Get You There" one is about the most common mistakes. I think he has 20 mistakes that people make that sort of, they're interpersonal issue questions. So they're sort of like, if there are some ways that you can be a jerk that you're not aware of, those will prevent you, because in a lot of organizations or a lot of interpersonal interactions, people, when you do something, I mean, I do stuff where I'm a bit jerkish and people don't actually tell you. They just sort of grumble and they go, oh, he's a bit of a jerk right there, right? And so what you would get from something like "What got you here won't get you there," what got you here won't get you there, is you will get tips on how to not be an asshole, quite frankly. Now, if you are a woman, I have actually also read this one, and it is audiobooked it. I audiobooked it, and it is How Women Rise. And what's really interesting about How Women Rise at Toronto Public Library, and I have mentioned this one as well before, so is if you summarize the mistakes that women make, so they have, I mean, I think it's really cute that they have 20 things that men do wrong, that everyone does wrong, but primarily men. The book was written by a dude for, you know, for business leaders and at a time. So there's only 12 things that women do wrong, as opposed to the 20 that men do. And I think what's really interesting about it is these ones actually are stuff like women, when they're making their mistakes in career management, tend to um, do things like they fail to take credit, whereas men take too much credit. And these are averages and everything, but it's just like men in the business world are too much of a jerk, and women are often not bold enough about. There are just some great stories in how women rise, and like, um, you know, this. One of the stories was this super high performing lawyer who wanted to be a partner, and she worked all the time and like just said, why do I keep getting passed over for a promotion? And you know, and a a guy who started on the same day as her, he came in on day one and he said, I want to make a partner right away. I want to be partner right away. And, you know, he goes through and he says, okay, so can I be a partner yet? Or whatever happened, however it went. And he gets the promotion and she gets stuck in her role as not making partner. And she's thinking, what the hell is this? And so eventually she confronts her boss, and her boss says, "Oh, I didn't. You never said you wanted to be partner." And she said, "Well, of course I'm. Why would I work 24 hours a day? You idiot. Of course I." So I just say, if you are, this is just such a good book. And anyways, it's back to
Really about creating a learning plan and understanding where you're going to get the insight you need and how to be as efficient as possible in getting that insight. Second piece of diagnosing your situation is understanding what type of business situation you're in, or mix more typically, and how that really influences the way you think about transitioning, right? And so I built this little framework, STARS model: startup, turnaround, accelerated growth, realignment, sustaining success. Not the sum total of all possible business situations, but a reasonable categorization. And by going through the process of thinking about what you're dealing with, it gives you insight into, for example, how you should, show up, right? The kind of style, the kind of approach that's going to be helpful. I like to contrast turnarounds with realignments. And there was another leader I worked with a few years back who came out of Europe in an organization, global food organization, where he'd done a big turnaround and moved into a position in the US, promotion that really was a realignment. And a lot of what he needed to do was really adjust his approach, right? Because he was really good at turnarounds. He was very action oriented. He was very decisive, come in and do the analysis, figure out what needs to be, what triage needs to be done right away, put in place the plan, replace most of the team. Whereas the new job was really very different, right? It was about evolving an organization, transforming elements of its culture, making it operate in a more integrated way. And there it was much more about, convincing people and building allies to, engage the organization in the necessary transformation of its culture and to some degree of its structure. And there he wasn't replacing people. He was working mostly, there was an exception, with the existing leadership team. And so this framework can be very helpful in how you sort of just orient yourself from the start, really, to, engaging with the organization. The example I gave you of the leader that derailed, that was an accelerated growth situation where the name of the game was to put in place structures and systems to allow scaling to happen. Now, the reality is that there may be an overall theme, but there may be different parts of what you inherit that are in different states. And it can be a really useful exercise to think about those, but also engage your team in a dialogue about how they see the nature of the business situations. And I often work with teams to get them to sort of reach consensus about what the state of different parts of the organization is, because that's a great place to start with what the work is that you need to do there. So the third dimension of that piece about really diagnosing your situation is about having the right conversations with, first of all, your boss, but perhaps with key stakeholders. I'm not going to go into this in detail beyond saying that there's some obvious stuff here and there's some not so obvious stuff here. The obvious conversations, and by conversations I don't mean a one-time conversation, it's more a topic that you need to deal with, is focusing in on those expectations and the resources available to you. It's easy to miss the other two, right? Style, which is really how are you going to work most effectively with your boss? How do they prefer to be communicated with? right? Are they someone who prefers to talk or prefers to communicate by other means, written means of some form? How much detail do they like? What kind of frequency of interaction do they want? And if you can sort of explicitly discuss that up front, it can really help a lot in terms of you building that key relationship. And the number two conversation is around the situation. And this is being sure that you and your boss and perhaps others are on the same page about the nature of the star situation, right? We're in turnaround as opposed to we're in realignment, right? As opposed to we're in sustaining success. Because, and I hope it's obvious, if you have a different view than your boss, and oh, by the way, your team, this can create all kinds of challenges, right? And so reaching alignment on your understanding of those things is really pretty critical. The middle box for establishing direction, this is one I don't find leaders struggle with too much, because I think the very business processes of most organizations help focus you on, creating the strategy, creating the goals, long-range financial planning, and so on. But just to summarize, to me, the essence of establishing direction in an organization is about the what, the how, and the why, right? What is it we need to do? Think of that as mission, goals, priorities. How are we going to do it? Think about this as strategy, not in the grand sense of corporate strategy, but strategy in terms of the how of what we're going to do, and why. Why should people get excited? What's inspiring about what we're going to do? And that really gets us into things like vision and purpose. And so, if you go deeper into this, it's really about how do you answer these questions and do it in a way that really people find compelling, that makes it clear, what needs to be done, that taps into we're going to be on the same page with the strategy, that hopefully provides a sense of vision or purpose around people can rally. So Laura just asked the question, any advice for a situation in which we're joining a startup in a new position that still has not been very well developed? Yeah. So, interesting category, Laura, is I think of it as the newly created position. And this is typically much harder than, I'm sorry to say, than established positions. Why? Because you need to work to define what that role is, right? And really put some substance into how you're going to create value in the context of that role. And what's particularly challenging about it is that it may overlap with other people's roles. And there may be points of friction where, person A thinks that's what they're there to do, when it's pretty clear to you, that you're there to do that. What's critical here is making sure that your boss, or in this case, maybe the CEO or others, goes through the work of supporting you in defining what your role needs to be. Because the more ambiguity there is about the role, the less clear it is about how you're going to create value, the less clear about what it is that success looks like, the less clear about how success will be measured is just going to create a lot of trouble for you. Right now, does it mean if there's ambiguity, you're doomed? No, but it means that you've got to typically, build relationships, more work to kind of lay out what the role really is all about. So Laura, hopefully that's helpful. It is an interesting challenge to be sure. So as you think about direction too, one thing I wanted to mention, and link to an article that we can give you, is it's great to establish goals, it's great to establish strategies, it's great to establish a sense of vision, but you have to also focus, in great detail on exactly what it is the organization is and is not doing. Because, I sometimes say the real strategy of the organization is the sum of the activity that people are engaged in. And so I co-authored 2018 this article. It's called Too Many Projects, but the subject is really initiative overload. And how do you really define the core, most important initiatives that are going to support the strategy, achieve the goals, as opposed to kind of layering more stuff on top of it? And how do you go through the exercise of really, looking hard at the full set of activities and deciding what to stop doing? Because that's really so critical. And so again, we'll provide you with a link to that article. So, you've gotten started successfully understanding your types of transitions, you've accelerated your learning, you've thought about the star situation and how you're going to show up as a leader, you've gained some alignment with your boss and key stakeholders. Based on all that insight, you've begun to establish direction for your organization. So then it's really now beginning to have an impact, right? And so those three boxes you see in the, the light, lime green, if you will, on the right-hand side, are about how do you begin to really have an impact and start to deliver results to the organization. So a little bit on each one of those. So I think it's Chanel added, agree which stop point is super critical. The act of asking for someone's preferences, sure, it's critical. Totally agree with you, right? Discussing values, yes. At a minimum, being aware of your own values, right? And making sure that even before you take the job, that organization is going to be reasonably aligned with your values and not put you in situations that are counter to it. So thank you, Chanel. That's a great observation. Building the team. So big subject in its own right. We could spend an entire day talking about, taking over a leadership team, inheriting one and beginning to reshape it. But I think that's the starting point, is to understand that you don't typically get to build your team. Sometimes you do. It's a new position, it's a role that hasn't existed before, you get to build a team. It's a from the ground up startup of something, maybe a new project, you get to build your team. But the reality is usually you inherit somebody else's team. And it's a team that's been shaped and run by your predecessor. When you arrive, it's not your team. Your objectives may be different than your predecessors, because of the demands of the business. And so, this is a very different challenge than, in quotes, building a team, right? It's a challenge of assessing that team and evolving it into what you need it to be in whatever time frame makes sense given the situation you're in, right? While continuing to have the organization operate and achieve necessary results. Will the presentation slides be available following the webinar? Yes, they will. We'll get you a copy of the presentation slides. So the analogy I use is leading a team you inherit is like preparing an airplane in mid-flight. Again, a lot to this, right? There's how do you engage in the process of assessing a new team? What are you looking for in your team members? are there roles that are particularly critical that you want to focus on making sure you've got the A players in first? And there's the delicate dance of evolution, right, of making changes without overwhelming the organization with too much change. It's a fascinating challenge. I actually wrote an article, another HB article we can give you a link to, Leading the Team You Inherit, that gets into that one in a bit more detail. I'd also say it really helps if you've got a model or a framework for thinking about what you're looking for in your team, right? And so this is something I use that I think is helpful about, especially for leaders who are taking new roles. The high-performing team you want to create has the right people in the right roles, is powerfully aligned.
Yeah, this part is not quite as relevant to what we're talking about. I think the bit about defining, like making sure you define success with your manager is really important. I mean, this guy's talk is highly structured towards delivering to CEOs and managers and directors as sort of more closer to IC or individual contributor or team lead roles. Some of this stuff is not quite as relevant. But here, let's pick up and jump ahead to the early wins. Let's go there.
Issues to have an effort. And again, these are skewing early wins.
Here we go.
Back to momentum, right? Back to how am I going to begin to have an impact? Early on, it's about credibility. It's about connection. It's about positive impression. But you don't get very far in before you need to be thinking about where you're going to focus your effort to really begin to have, a clear, measurable impact, or at least observable impact on the organization. And so there's a whole, process you need to go through of really, thinking hard and distilling down to what are the key areas that you're going to focus a lot of attention on. And you can't take on too many, right? You've really got to place your bets, enough bets, right, that if something doesn't pay off, you're still going to make some progress, but not too many, lest you get sort of so dispersed. Getting wins in the right ways. This is about understanding the culture, right, and understanding the way you go about doing things should be consistent with the culture, unless you're trying to change it, and that's a whole other topic. Taking the star situation into account, what I mean by that is the way you go about getting wins in a turnaround is very different than what a win looks like in a realignment or an accelerated growth situation. Chanel, I'm taking this out and told to make my personnel changes super quickly, particularly the firings. I feel there's some level of observation of the data that helps in making this decision alongside some intuition. So the only place I don't go with this statement is the super quickly part. I think it really depends on the situation. In a turnaround, absolutely. In a realignment or sustaining success environment, maybe not so quickly. What is absolutely true, Chanel, is that if you let very much time go, the team becomes your team in a deeper sense, and making changes becomes more difficult. As a rule of thumb, and it's just a rule of thumb, I'm back up, right? You don't want to pull the trigger, without really giving people a decent chance, right? Because what you observe may not be correct. Even what you've been told might not be correct. Now, again, there are political realities and constraints here, right? My rule of thumb is by the 90-day mark, I want to be very clear on the major changes I want to make in the team. If it's a turnaround, I may need to operate more quickly than that. Doesn't mean I've made all the changes, but I've got a sense of what changes I need to make, and I've begun to put in place the process for dealing with that. Any perspective on managing extremely different generational groups? Wow, another huge topic, right? Wow, I don't even know if I can do that one justice, right? Because it's such a big group, or such a big topic. I think, obviously this is a problem that takes care of itself as the new generation, takes command, if you will. In the interim, it can be a source of tremendous, frustration and conflict. Also, some time to engage in the sense-making process that you're describing. So, final piece substantively in terms of delivering results, creating alliances. This is really about mapping the stakeholders in the organization, understanding where what you're trying to do lines up with what other people are trying to do, understand if there's ways you can support other people in what they're trying to do to build relationship capital, looking at the networks of the organization, thinking about how you're going to engage in influence. Again, a big subject, right? Before I was a business school professor, I was a professor of diplomacy at the Kennedy School of Government, where I was doing research on international negotiations. And so I took a lot of the ideas about what great diplomats do in terms of thinking, in terms of alliances and advancing agendas, and sort of pulled it into that part of the first 90 days. So finally, there's the managing yourself process. You notice this is underneath everything, right? Because it really is about how do you manage your energy and yourself through what can be, sorry, just a second. Through what can be both a very exciting, but also very stressful time. And to me, a lot of it's about managing your energy through that process. But again, there's a few things that I think help. Making sure you're taking time to step back, reflect, and plan, and not getting completely immersed in things and not getting the requisite perspective. Ensuring you're focusing on the right things. I'm not going to go through the whole list. Tapping into and managing your energy. And critically, I think, especially at more senior levels, building your advice network, right? As someone who works with CEOs in transition, probably the most important thing I do is give them someone, who I think is reasonably thoughtful and certainly wants to help, someone to talk to when they can't really talk to anybody else, or they have a very small number of people to do. And so for leaders at all levels, I think focusing on making sure you build that advice network, because that's really going to help you keep your equilibrium, make good choices as you move through the transition process. So that's the framework. I guess I would just say too that, the way I sort of think about this and the way I've tried to implement it is to look at this not just as a framework for helping individual leaders take new roles, but also a framework for helping organizations accelerate everybody, right? And so the work I do these days really is about implementing this framework as a system, an acceleration system in the context of organizations. Why is this important? Because there's so many transitions going on at any given point in time in organizations, right? If I was able to pull you directly and ask you, do you have someone who's working for you who's in transition, a peer in transition, a boss in transition, et cetera, most of you would be having at least, one other person's transition impacting what you're doing, and it might well be.
There we are. So I mean, this was really actually I really enjoyed watching this after having read the book, but and also because I'm in the middle of my first 90 days. I think I'm effectively 30 days in, and but that's it. You want to sort of secure early wins, start to make your connections early, start making connections not just with the individual teams. So when I started, I actually booked meetings with everybody underneath my manager, even people who. So my manager is has multiple teams underneath him, and some of those. And so I was talking to people who report into other managers just to try and get a sense for the entire network there. And we're in a remote world, and so connecting with other people that you're going to be working with, it's not going to happen at a desk anymore. And so really just picking a point up in the org chart, maybe a level up, and then just talking to people is a really useful, good start. And it also kind of happens within that time frame where you've got a little bit of leeway, like you're going through your onboarding. Of course you want to be doing, if you're getting tickets on day one, you want to be doing your tickets, and maybe there are other ways to ramp up. Maybe you're not coming into quite so high a leadership position, and so maybe you don't need to connect as much. But this was really good. So you make your connections, you secure the early wins, so and you keep reflecting in this manage yourself bit. You go through and you continually reevaluate, how am I doing at this point. I actually, while this was running, I actually wrote down, this one was really prescient to me, or really salient to me, is taking the time to make sure you define what success looks like, and even revisit and continue to talk about what success looks like. So of the other ones, and I don't even have, I'm actually working through two more called there's the talent code and the culture code. The culture code is again about company culture and belonging and things like that, and the value of belonging and company culture. So what do we have? I think this will probably be the last one because they're taking their time. But happiness, let's bring up the happiness advantage so that we know what we're... this was actually another one that was a Click Book Club, so they're probably, you might even... I think this one was. The happiness advantage. So it's this one. He is a Harvard trained psychologist who studies something called positive psychology. So psychology. Anyways, he probably talks about it in the video. I picked one that was sort of. This one's a bit of a TED Talky one.
When I first went off to college to start collecting debts, my father was buoyed by the idea that he knew I would just come back with a high-quality job. I'd come back and be a doctor, or a lawyer, or a banker. And when I came back from college and told him, Dad, I want to study the science of happiness, he sat me down. And he said, Sean, I just want to let you know that the average scientific journal article is only read on average by 7 people total, which is incredibly depressing research statistic for us researchers to hear, because we know that that statistic also includes our moms. So we're down to 6 people to read these studies, which is a tragedy, because I believe the research is the key to bridging the gaps that we're hearing about what we've been learning about in terms of theory and what we've been seeing applied in practice. My very first talk was out at a large Swiss bank at the beginning of the banking collapse. And when I was introduced by a senior level leader there who was asked by HR to introduce me, and he did not want to do so. And instead of reading my bio, he said, well, we don't have bonuses for everyone, but here's a talk on happiness from a guy from America. You can imagine the cold response as the tech team, unfortunately, in the back turned on the Don't Worry, Be Happy theme music as I walked out from the back of the room. But within 10 minutes of talking to them, as I started talking about research that was directly aimed at how we can actually get people to believe that their behavior matters again, to restart forward progress in the midst of a challenge, you can see people start to pick up their pens and start to take notes that they want to bring back to their teams. 7 years later, earlier this year, I was out at the Pentagon. I was invited to give a talk there on happiness, and I was brought into a room full of senior level leaders, people that were leaders of NATO forces in Afghanistan and Iraq. We were special forces, and I did the bravest thing I think I've ever done. I started a talk at the Pentagon with a story about a unicorn, which, if you've seen my TED Talk, you know what I'm talking about. But afterwards, one of the senior leaders came up to me and said, Sean, 10 years ago, we could not have had a talk on happiness at the Pentagon. And I think he's right. That's where I want to start my talk today, because I believe we're at the midst of twin revolutions. Of course, we're sitting in the heart of the technological revolution that we already know about. But we're also realizing that while technology can increase productivity, we're also finding that we can't increase the amount of workload and stress and strain on the same individual and still hope to maintain those same levels of productivity and profitability. The second realization and revolution will be the idea that we can increase productivity by increasing optimal human flourishing. And that's what I want to talk about today about that research. We were asked to talk about one thing that was...
Okay, so is this one going too fast? Like, I think he's talking fast in his talk, and I have it at accelerated speed. But I think the important point that you want to take from what I got out of the happiness advantage was it makes a massive difference to your long-term success if you focus on your own happiness. And in teaching, it's just your levels of energy will increase if you're happy, right? And so having more energy when you're happy means you're able to work harder. So it's like really... Anyways, I'll just let him keep going, but it's just a massive, massive competitive advantage to be happy. And he talks about in the book, you can actually rewire your brain to be a more happy person by doing by doing a bunch of things. Like, for example, okay, I'm going to let it go, and then we can talk more. It's just really exciting.
They were going to put out there that was going to start debate. And what I would like to argue is that you're not just your genes and your environment. That scientifically, happiness can be a choice. But it's a choice that we can influence through our organizations. And when we do so, it becomes the greatest competitive advantage in the modern economy. This is my 3rd time out speaking at Google. One of the times I came here was with Ming Tan to do a Google talk. And while I was talking to them, I started noticing all these comparisons between what we saw at Google and what I was seeing during my 12 years at Harvard. For example, when I talk to my friends from Waco, Texas, where I grew up, about going off to Harvard, they say, why would you study happiness there? They seem to have everything: opportunities, resources, wealth, successes. And when I was at Google, I was talking to people, and I asked them if they walked around in a constant state of ecstasy. And one of the women in the accounting department said, sheepishly, that she actually felt very frustrated sometimes on Fridays because she would see the line for the free sushi and it was way too long. How is she expected to be productive when the line is that long? I ask you. But what I started realizing, it wasn't about the external world that causes people to become happier. And that's not what causes Google to be so successful, as Laszlo was mentioning earlier. What I want to talk about is what I was seeing at Harvard. One of the very first studies I did was a study of 1,600 Harvard students. I was looking to see, can you predict in a population that's very intelligent, very successful, very creative, who will rise to the top in terms of levels of happiness and success while they're there? I looked at everything. We asked their familial income, their SAT scores. We looked at their GPA. We looked at the number of clubs that they're involved in. We found out the number of romantic relationships, which we found at Harvard was on average less than 1 per Harvard student, which is why many people come out to Stanford. And we found it was 0.5 sexual partners per Harvard student, which I only mentioned because I still have no idea what that statistic even means. We were always taught to round up, but 0.5 sexual partners was the equivalent of second base, and it was useless information to us. But imagine a student who, ever since they were 1-year-old, was placed into a crib, wearing a onesie that you can buy at the bookstore that says "Bound for Harvard," and maybe a cute little Yale hat in case something terrible happened. And ever since they were in pre-K school, which they got into 4 years before they were conceived, they were the top 1% of their class. Junior high, high school, standardized test, top 1%. They walk into Harvard and they have a terrible realization, one that many people when they come to Google have as well. They suddenly realize that 50% of them are now below average. To put it more poignantly, when I talk to these students, I said, it seems based upon my research that 99% of you will not graduate in the top 1%, which they don't find that funny either. But the reason that's interesting is they've decided to pin their levels of happiness on a future success, which is related to something small, like grades, which if you know the statistics on grades, I can roll a pair of dice, and that's equally predictive of your future job income as your college GPA actually is. But they consign 99% to unhappiness, and the top 1%, when we study them, is actually not that happy either. The system is broken. It's based upon a flawed system of happiness and success, a formula for it, which is at the heart of my research. What I do is I study what I believe to be one of the fundamental problems that is causing us to limit both our happiness and success within organizations. And it's the formula we get there. And it's the way that we manage, and the way that we parent, and it's the way that we do self-development. Most people follow the formula, which is if you work harder, you're going to be more successful. As soon as you achieve these goals, think how happy you're going to be. Think how often we do that. As soon as I finish this project, then I'll be happier. As soon as I finish this presentation, then I'm going to feel happier. As soon as I finish all this travel, then I'll feel happier. As soon as I get into the right school, I'll feel happier. As soon as I get the right job, I'll feel happier. But what we notice is that formula, which undergirds most of our parenting styles and organizations, is scientifically broken backwards for two reasons. The first reason is every time your brain has had a success in the past, what have you done? You've changed the goalpost of what success looked like almost immediately. You got good grades in school, don't get excited yet, you don't even have a job. You get a job, that's great, you have a job, but now you have to hit your sales target. Well, you hit your sales target, that's great, but we're going to raise your sales target for the next quarter, right? So, and each moment, we want to see sales rise, we want to see growth improve, we want to see grades improve. That's not the problem. The problem is where happiness lies in the formula for our managing our organizations and our first selves. What we found is if happiness is on the opposite side of success, you pushed it over the cognitive horizon. Your brain never quite gets there because it's a moving target. But flip around the formula. If you cause people to invest in their social support networks, deepen their social support networks, raise their levels of optimism, and change the way that they view stress from a threat to a challenge, it turns out every single business and educational outcome we know how to test for rises dramatically. We find
Take a second to think about that. And that's one of, in fact, I don't know if he talks about it here, but he talks about it in the book. The number one predictor for lifetime happiness is over a 70-year longitudinal study. So they followed the same people all the way through until it's just love. If you have love in your life, if you have friends, if you have strong social networks, you will be happier. And if you're happier, here it is. It's just right there in the text. Productivity rises 31%. And so just like this thing that we do, we show up and, we talk, we hang out and we watch a couple of videos or we keep this stuff on the background or we just connect for a little bit every week. And just having these connections is good for you. Anyways.
find that productivity rises 31% when people move from a neutral state to a positive state. We find that sales rise by 37% cross-industry. We found, similar to the research you found in the great book Give and Take by Adam Grant, we know that if you provide social support at work, you're 40% more likely to receive a promotion over the next 2-year period of time. We know that you live longer, your symptoms are less acute. We find that you stay at organizations even longer. All that information is great, but the problem is that if you try to raise your levels of success rate for the rest of your life and you're successful at that, your happiness levels flatline. They don't move. Flip around the formula. If we find some way of investing in our engagement levels at work, if you've read Dan Pink's fabulous book, Drive, if you've been looking at ways to deepen social connection, if we can change the way we view stress, suddenly a different picture emerges. That's what I want to talk to you about, because what works really well in the laboratory sometimes doesn't work out in the messiness of life. So since I've spent my time at Harvard, I left in the middle of the banking crisis to try and figure out how we could apply this research out within the real world. And a lot of the work I'm going to talk about is at organizations, but I've also traveled to 51 countries working with farmers in Zimbabwe that lost their land, working with children at St. Jude Children's Hospital, trying to find out from some of the doctors there why it is that 4-year-old children with terminal cancer are more likely to tell their parents everything's going to be okay than the reverse. Why is there access to resilience in childhood that we lose sometimes in adulthood, and how do we import that to soldiers coming back from combat services? That's not what we're going to get to talk about today. What I want to talk about is some of the ways we've seen these organizations be able to thrive. We do 2 things. One of the things we do is, if you've read Charles Duhigg's fantastic book, The Power of Habit, you know how important habits can be. And over the past 7 years, what I've been doing is I've been looking to find out, are there habits that take less than 2 minutes a day that are akin to brushing your teeth? That if you did them for a period of 21 days in a row, that you could trump your genes and even up to 8 decades of experience. And that's exactly what we found. We found small little habits, something as simple as Martin Seligman found, where you write 3 things new that you're grateful for each day for 21 days in a row, can actually move people that are continually testing as pessimists at an organization to testing as low and moderate level optimists, and the pattern exists for even 6 months. One of the things that I found that I love is if you write a 2-minute email praising or thanking one person you know, it turns out if you do that every day for a different person for 21 days, if you do it for the next 3 days, writing somebody a 2-minute email praising them or thanking them, you're going to get fully addicted to it. Because you're going to spend all day long thinking about how amazing you were for writing that email in the morning.
So one of the things that I actually have, I'll check that after. It's a message from a friend. I actually have downloaded an app called let me see if I can get this up there. So you can't really see it because it's auto-focusing on my face. How do I do that? There we go. Is that it? Okay. Anyways, the app is called the 90-Day Action Plan. It comes from, it is mentioned in the 90-Day onboarding plan, the first 90 days book. And one of the things that I added to my plan after reading this one was, so it has a checklist of 5 things you want to do every day. And so one of the things I added was show gratitude to somebody, to something, to, and so I try and find a reason every day now to tell my wife something that she did that I was thankful for. And this is, in theory, meant to rewrite who you are internally to be a more grateful person and a happier person. And so, and again, all of these other business books, they talk about building habits. And so I recommend that app called the 90-Day Action Plan by Business Blueprint. It's on Android. I'm sure it's on iOS. And what it has is you can write down 5 things that you want to make habits of. And like every morning at 9 a.m. it goes bing, and stay married. That's right. And stay married. But every morning at 9 a.m. it goes bing, and so I go, oh yeah, I got to do my 5 things. And then at 5 p.m. at the end of the workday, it goes bing, and I can either tap off here, let me see if I can swipe this up. And so it should make a fun sound when I tap so it has my checkbox. I'm going to do this. Well, that was not at all impressive, but trust me. Oh, wait. No. Okay. When you complete a thing, it makes a really fun bing sometimes. I just don't know how to make it work, but that's it. So you just have a daily recurring checklist for the 5. So if you want to do LEET code, you do a LEET code a day. If you rewire your happiness, so say thank you to someone every day, reach out to a friend every day, just set these reminders to be happier people. And this is not about tech. This is not about getting a better job at a FAANG company. But it also is, because anyways.
And you get these great emails back because they don't know about the 2-minute rule, so they keep writing how great you are, and you're like, yep, all this is true. But 21 days later, when we ask you about your social connection, you realize you have incredibly deep social connection. Breadth, depth, and meaning in your social relationships has increased dramatically. We found that social connection is not only the greatest predictor of happiness within inside organizations, but we also found that social connection is as predictive of how long all of you will end up living as obesity, high blood pressure, or smoking. We sure fight hard against the negative. We forget to tell people how powerful the positive can be. With my last minute, what I want to do is to tell you about what we're doing with organizations. We've seen these fantastic organizations take these ideas and run with them. In fact, Nationwide Insurance, for example, I'm working with the Nationwide Sales Academy, where when people are onboarded to become a sales leader there, they're taught that the new social script is when you come into the organization, it's not that once you hit your sales, then you're going to feel happier, but that happiness and optimism and social connection are exactly what's going to fuel the sales. So when we talk about this later on, it's not a surprise. That's what causes people to be successful here. One of the groups we were working with that's been led by Gary Baker actually went through one of the positive psychology training programs. We found, as I was talking to Larry from Gallup earlier this morning, we found that their Gallup scores actually improved dramatically in terms of their engagement with just a very short positive psychology intervention, but their revenues have moved from $350 million to $950 million over the past year, and that's actually, they think, going to happen again this coming year. We're finding at KPMG, we did a 3-hour intervention with them in December of 2008, right before the busiest tax season in history. 4 months later, during the busiest tax season in history, in April, we compared them to a control group that got a technical training, and what we found is exactly what Gallup found. Only 25% of your successes over the next 5 years are predicted based upon your intelligence and technical skills, which is how we hire, educate, and train. 75% of your successes will be based upon the belief that your behavior matters, your social connections, and the way that we perceive the stress that's coming in. And the final thing I want to mention is the work we were doing at UBS. Ali Akram and Peter Salovey from Yale University, Ali's now out at Stanford, and I went into UBS, and we found that most of the stress management programs that we put people through was actually causing people to get sicker. Because we tell people that if you go to a stress management program, as companies make you more stress, we say, do you know stress is related to the 10 leading causes of death and disease in the United States? Did you know stress was found by the World Health Organization to be the #1 killer? Did you know that stress is catabolic? It tears down every organ in the human body. After that, what do you feel? Stress, you're like, stop emailing me so much, you're destroying every organ in my body, which I think would make a great away message while you're here. But what I think is fascinating is all that information's true, but there's equally true information that shows that stress, not good stress, I'm talking about high levels of negative stress, actually causes your immune system to turn on to its highest possible level, cognitive functioning to improve, memory to deepen. It turns out our social bonds deepen to its highest possible level, which is why when we go through, when the military onboards people, they don't put them through a beach vacation. They onboard them with boot camp. And that creates these meaningful narratives that people talk about for their entire rest of their career. What we did is we showed 2 2-minute videos to these individuals in the middle of the banking crisis. Stress is enhancing, stress is debilitating. Here's how you fight it, here's how you embrace it. 6 weeks later, equal levels of stress. But the group that saw stress as a challenge instead of as a threat had a 23% drop in their health-related symptoms. Stress is inevitable, but its effects upon us are not. And I believe that all this research comes down to these three conclusions. Scientifically, happiness can be a choice. You don't have to just be your genes and your environment, and we can actually influence it. The second one is that happiness spreads. When we choose to do this, it actually cascades to other people, changing the social script. And finally, happiness is an advantage. In fact, what I would argue is that because it improves every single business and educational outcome we know, I believe that happiness, optimism, social connection are the greatest competitive advantages in the modern economy. And all it takes is taking this research that's only read on average by 7 people total and just bringing it to life. So thank you so much for the opportunity to share this research.
There we go. So again, that one is Power of Habit. He did talk fast. I should have done that much slower. Apologies. And here's one. He mentioned The Power of Habit, and it is currently available on Overdrive. So I can add that one to the list. Although it's probably the same as the 3 other habit books that I've, 2 other habit books I've already read. So, but either way, when you do them in audiobook, they're so easy. You just go for a jog and you're like, audiobook, audiobook, audiobook. And I'm so smart. Anyways, that's, I think, all for this week. It's 8:45. And so and that's a bit of a departure from the system design stuff. But I thought, especially the negotiation one was really useful, but all of these other ones kind of work together as well. In terms of like a broader career management perspective. And if we go back and we talk about, so week 11, OS and concurrency. So this one's going to be really interesting because it's a bunch of stuff that I know nothing about. So I've got to do a massive week of research in trying to figure out what even the hell are we going to talk about here. But these are going to be interesting things to learn. I'm looking forward to these ones. And that's the week. So thank you. It's good to be back. I kind of missed everybody. So that was, I really enjoyed that. So if there is anything else, there we go. Yay. Thanks, Pebs. Thanks, Josh. And Rajat, if you're still here, thank you as well for showing up. And that's it. I'm going to hit the stop. Yeah, you too. We'll talk to you soon. And, oh my God, send me like private messages to let me know who are the companies that you've done your interviews with. Because speaking of big news, social connections, and things like that, I don't know if any of you have heard of Chorus.ai. Chorus.ai has Chorus.ai has a Toronto office, and they have just been acquired by someone for $575 million. And we have a friend who has been at Chorus.ai for a few years now, and our very own good friend Jeff Wong is hopefully, we don't know what the details are, but he's hopefully about to have himself a slice of a $575 million pie. So that's really my face hurts from smiling on his behalf. Like, yay, Jeff. We're really excited for Jeff at his not quite. It's like half a unicorn. It's half a unicorn, but it's that's really. I'm really excited. That's really good news. I'm just really really happy for him, and yeah. So that was his news to share, but I assume that you guys, you all probably don't message him every week or two just to say hi. So yeah, that was good news. Anyways, so that's it. We're going to end the week on good news, and thank you so much for coming.